Hey everybody, Heather here from Heather's Hobby Haven, and today we're going to work on our December watercoloring kit. And this month we're going to use a Tina Winkle stamp by Stampavie, and it's called Alex in the Snow with Puppies. And this is a clear polymer stamp. It's really nice, but we're going to color that today. And I have already stamped my image on Canson 140-pound watercolor paper. So let's get started. Alright, so I'm going to start by outlining my whole image with tumbled glass. And so I'm just going to pick me up a little dab of that over here, and I have my little cheat sheet over here on the side. So I've got just a little bitty bit on the end of my water brush, and I'm just going to very lightly go right next to him. And my brush is a little bit wet, so it's kind of fading out as it goes. And then I'm going to wipe the excess off so I don't get too much. And I'm going to use just the water in my brush to fan that out until it looks like there's no line there anymore. And you may have to wipe your brush off in between a little bit, because every time you touch the ink you do pick that back up on your brush. And then I'll grab me some more after I've got that feathered out how I like it. And I'm going to, again, just lay down a line of my tumbled glass. Let's go around the little puppy here. Down by his tail. And then I'll wipe off my excess again, and then just use the water in my brush and spread it out onto my paper until it's just a little, there's no more line. It just fades out into nothing. Let's get right here next to his face. Well, I got quite a bit on there. That's really blue. I'll wipe my brush off and pick up a little bit of that. I don't want it quite that blue. And again, dab my brush, get that excess ink off, and then just use water to make it disappear out here on the edge. I'm going to turn him around. We'll do this other side. I'll go right along this cute little puppy he's got down here. Fan it out. Want to go around a few of these little snowflakes too that are out here on the outside. I'll probably come back here in a little bit and add a little bit more. With watercoloring, I add a lot of layers. I'll go in and add just a light layer the first time, and then I may come back and add 2 or 3 or 4 more layers on there just to build up the color. I don't put it all down the very first time. Around his hat. I'll get around this snowflake a little bit. Same with this one. Alright, so for his face I'm going to use Tattered Rose. So again, I'm going to pick me up just a little bit, and I'm going to lay my brush down where I want it to be darkest. So I'm going to say the light's coming from over here. So I'm going to start on this side of his face, and I'm just going to put a little bit along these little earmuff, and then go up here underneath of his cap. And then I'm going to wipe off this little bit of extra I have on my brush, and I'm going to use what I laid down to spread out onto his face a little bit more. Okay, and I think I'll need a little bit more, so let me grab a little bit. And again, I'll just start where I want it to be darkest, so I'm going to go up here along his cap. Okay, and then I'll wipe the extra off of my brush, and then I'll use that line I laid down to color in some more on his face. Okay, that looks pretty good for a first coat. So while that's, I skip around when I'm coloring, so while that's drying, I'm going to go down here and I'm going to give his pants a little bit of color. So let's go ahead and do that by adding some walnut stain to his pants. And I'm going to want his pants to be darkest right here where his legs come together. So I'm going to lay a little line down there, and then I want it to be darker up here underneath of his shirt. So I'm going to put a little bit of walnut stain on there. Then I'm going to dab my brush off so I only have water on it. And then I'm going to use that ink that I laid down to spread out onto the rest of his pants. You may have to give your brush a little squeeze. Mine's getting a little dry, so I'll give it a little squish there. Grab me a little bit more of my ink. Okay, wipe my brush off, and then come back and spread that out. And I can see that I squeezed my brush a little too hard, so it's really wet now. So now I'm going to have to wait for this section to dry quite a bit. It's kind of making a little puddle on there. So we'll let that dry for a second, and let's go up and work on his face. Alright, so I'm going to add a little bit more color to his face. So I'm going to grab me a little bit of my tattered rose. We're going to darken it up just a little bit. And again, I'm going to start where I want it to be the darkest. So I'm going to lay down a little bit over here on this side, right next to his earmuff and underneath of his hair. And then I'm going to wipe off my excess ink. And then I'm going to use that little bit that I laid down to bring into his face. That darkened him up a little bit, but we'll let him dry, and then maybe we'll add a little bit of some shadows in there. And it looks like right here I missed a part of the background, so I'm going to add a little bit of my tumbled glass right here next to his shirt. Give that some color right here. That's what happens when you color upside down. Alright, so his face is almost dry, so let me show you how I did I'm going to add a little shading to that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab me just a little bit of my tumbled glass, or my tattered rose right here, and up here on my chart, I have it laminated. I'm just going to put a little dab right here, and then I'm going to wipe my brush off, and then just on the very end of my brush, I'm going to get a small little dot of tea dye, and I'm going to mix it in with this up here. And that's not very much paint, but that's all I'll need to color his face, and probably a couple of others. And I just leave it sit there, and it doesn't dry out. You can leave it on there for a long time. So with that, I'm going to give his face a little bit of shadow. So I want my face to be shadowed more over here on this side, same as I did when I laid down my first ink. So I'm going to go right along his earmuff, wipe off my excess, and then just kind of feather it out so that there's not going to be any harsh line right there. Okay, and I think I'll add a little bit down here on his chin. So grab me a little bit more, wipe off the excess again, and then just use the water in my brush to feather it. Let's add a little bit more underneath of his hat. Okay, that looks pretty good. So I'm going to let that dry, but while that's drying, I'm going to go down here and add a little bit more to his pants. And for those, we're coloring with walnut stain again. So I'm going to go grab a little bit of my walnut stain. I think I'll darken it up here a little bit underneath of his shirt. I got so much water on it the first time that they kind of turned this weird greenish brown color. But that's okay. Watercoloring is supposed to be fun, and it's not perfect every time. So grab me a little bit more and darken up his line of his pants here where his legs are stuck together. Give those a little bit more color. Same for this side. Let's give this side a little bit of something. And just feather it out a little bit with your water and your brush. So what's great about this Canson watercolor paper, it's really thick, so I can paint on this for a long time before it starts to, you have to really get it wet before the paper starts to bead up. And really play with it. So I haven't had that happen. I've had it happen a couple of times, but not very often. Okay, those look pretty good. So let's go back up here to his face while that's drying, and let's give his cheeks a little bit of color. So for his cheeks, I'm gonna get his face wet with a little bit of my Tattered Rose. So I'm just gonna swipe a little bit on just to get it wet, because we're gonna kind of wipe that off a little bit, and then I'm gonna grab me a little bit of Worn lipstick, and Worn lipstick is really pink, so I don't need that much. So I'm just gonna give it a couple little dabs, dab, dab, dab. And then I'm gonna wipe all that off my brush. And then with the Tattered Rose I put down on his cheeks first, I'm just going to kind of spread that into the Worn lipstick. Give it a little bit of shadow so it's not quite so pink when you wipe it around on his face. And each time I leave the paper, I'm wiping that excess ink off of my brush onto a little paper towel I have sitting right here. And so I'm not pulling the ink. If you just continue wiping and wiping and wiping, you're just moving the ink around on there. So you need to get rid of a little bit on your brush on there. Okay, so he's looking pretty good, but I might come back here in a little bit and give him a little bit pinker cheeks, but I haven't really settled on that yet. So while his face is drying, I'm going to go down here to the bottom and we're going to do his boots.